When it gets dark, I feel the fear creeping over me. We were riding through the TNT area. All at once he yelled for us to look at that thing in the road. As soon as the lights hit it, to me it just looks like a man with wings. It was dirty gray color with wings on its back. It has muscular legs like a man and fiery red eyes that glow. I close my eyes day or night and I can see those fiery eyes staring at me. It spread its wings a little and went straight up into the air. It dived at our car. We were all terrified. I know I'll never forget it. I don't think anyone can who has seen it.
Whatever they did see, it definitely scared them.
Mothman was a creature, some believe metaphysical creature, some believe an actual physical creature that was in Point Pleasant in November of 1966.
It just came up out of the blue, I guess. Some teenagers out in the McClintic Wildlife area, the TNT area.
You had two couples in a car, the Mallets and the Scarberries, and they were going by the old TNT, one of the main buildings that they used to use, the North Power Plant, during when they were manufacturing the stuff for the war. And they seen a large, what they thought was a man, about 7 feet tall. And when he stood up, they seen the wings, and then they seen the red eyes, and they knew this wasn't human.
They were a little spooked. They didn't know what to do, so they decided they would come back into town and tell somebody at Tiny's Drive-In, where she worked as a waitress. They were going to tell the owner. But as they came out the road and got onto Route 62, that's when they saw it again. And she said it was standing by the road watching them as they went by in the car. She said its wings came out, flapped once, and she said it went straight up in the air. As they hit the Route 62 on the straight stretch, that's when they noticed it came over top of the car. They were doing about 90, 95 miles an hour, and she said it stayed right over top of the car.
And basically what happened is after they seen this creature up in the TNT area, one of the first places they went to was obviously the police station to report what it is that they seen. And the cops didn't believe them. I mean, that would be hard to believe.
After that first initial sighting on November 15th, for about the next year and a half, you had over 100 reported sightings to the police department, the sheriff's department. Now, there were a lot of people that saw this thing that would not go and report it to the police department. Back then, people just made fun of everybody that reported it. They called them crazy, said they were nuts and stuff like that. So a lot of people kind of kept it to themselves, you know. They were saying that what we saw was this monster-like creature.
Most always people talk about Mothman's red eyes. As far as the way this thing looked, about 7-8 feet tall with a wingspan, like a 6 to 8 foot wingspan. Probably similar in what you think an angel might look like, but uglier. So I've heard people say that they've seen like a muscular type look to it. But the red eyes are always what people talk about in their descriptions. And what's odd is that there's very few discrepancies between what people said they seen, even outside of Point Pleasant. Witnesses seeing this thing all over the world pretty much always describe it the same way, and that's pretty much it. 7-8 feet tall, wings, red eyes.
The witnesses that went to the authorities about the Mothman sightings were soon visited, not all of them, but some of them, were visited by these strange men.
Of all the three entities, Mothman, Men in Black, and the UFOs, the Men in Black are by far the ones that creep me out the most.
Dressed in black suits, black hats, sunglasses. Some people felt they were government people, others felt that they were military personnel. Other people felt they were from another realm, that they weren't, they weren't real, One of the local newspaper reporters that reported all this stuff in the newspapers, would look out her window at night and see him sitting outside of her house in a car.
The Men in Black would come in to Mary Hyer's office and basically threaten her and say, you need to quit talking about whatever, this isn't really going on, it's all in your head. They would pick up pencils and look at it like they'd never seen it before, just act really odd.
And some people felt threatened by that. They would tell them to stop talking about it, that they were just causing a lot of panic. And some of the witnesses felt they were just genuinely in danger.
I didn't know who they were at the time. Again, not till I see Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones do I know that Men in Black have been at my home interviewing my family, or interviewing my neighbors, or, in the area. They were just government men.
Dad, when he was writing the Mothman books, he wrote the Facts Behind the Legend and Behind the Red Eyes. And basically those books are based on going one-on-one with the eyewitnesses and allowing them to tell what it is that they experienced themselves. So when he interviewed Linda Scarberry, who was the main eyewitness, I was with him. I remember her telling us some stories, and she had told about one night in the middle of the night, she was woken up and there was a man standing at the foot of her bed, and he was just staring at her. And she knew it was one of these guys, one of these Men in Black, because they'd been showing up here and there and everywhere, trying to hush up the eyewitnesses and doing what they could. And for some reason, these Men in Black wanted something to do with the eyewitnesses' children. And when John Keel wasn't here in Point Pleasant, he would often write back and forth to the eyewitnesses, and especially Linda. They had a good relationship. And he would say, things like, well, you need to protect your daughter. In order to protect her, take a crucifix and put it above her baby bed. So she did. And in the middle of the night, when she was woken up, she seen the man standing at the foot of her bed, and he pulled out a cigarette and lit it for some weird reason. And when he did, the light reflected off the crucifix, and he disappeared right in front of her eyes.
So a lot of people were, they were afraid of them. They didn't know who they were.
It was just government men, and they were asking questions, and some of them were strange. I was a kid, you know what I mean? I didn't think anything of it. I finally get to see a UFO, lived here forever. We think we see UFOs, and who knows who they belong to.
In the mid-'60s, here in the Ohio Valley in general, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, there were a slew of UFO sightings. People were seeing strange lights in the sky, sometimes in the daylight. people didn't know what was going on. You know, they were trying to figure out, you know, what all was going on with that. And then shortly after, your Mothman sightings started taking place. So there was people who felt there was a connection with that too.
I would say that there probably is some sort of connection between the UFOs and Mothman. I would find it odd if there weren't, just because of the activity that was going on at the same time in the same place.
So one night, I stop alongside the Ohio River on my way to Huntington because a UFO is flying over the river, okay? It looks just like a UFO. It's hovering, it's zipping back and forth. People are pointing. There must be 8 cars stopped watching.
We've seen some weird lights in the sky before, you know, but that's kind of a thing that we just kind of accept around here anymore.
Then our bridge fell, and no one wanted to hear about the Mothman anymore.
There were a lot of UFO sightings, there was the Mothman sightings, there was a lot of men in black coming around and talking to these witnesses, and then it kind of crescendoed with the Silver Bridge collapse.
November 15th, 1966 is when the Mothman basically made his home here in Point Pleasant. And then December 15th, 1967, exactly 13 months to the day, is when the Silver Bridge collapsed.
There were people that immediately thought, hey, you know, this Mothman stuff has something to do with the bridge disaster. Other people felt that the only reason the bridge fell is because it was 40 years old, it was in ill repair, and it was a poor design for the kind of traffic that flowed on it.
People were lined up on the bridge trying to get from one side to the other.
One of the eye bars sheared, and when that happened, the whole bridge just fell.
It was the worst bridge disaster in U.S. history, and it killed 46 people.
Local people went down on the bridge, people we knew, people in my class.
It affected everybody. Even 50 years later, it still affects our town.
There's people to this day that said, you know, well, we saw this thing flying around that bridge the day before it fell. We saw men in black climbing up and down on the bridge.
A lot of people believe that he was an omen sent to warn, because after that happened, he was never really seen here, you know, again. But if anything, I guess he could have been some kind of omen or warning sign, because he was also seen other places before disasters happen. There's been reports of him showing up Chernobyl before that nuclear disaster happened, New York City before 9/11 happened. In Missouri, I think that there was another bridge collapse back, you know, in the early 2000s or so, and apparently there was a spotting there. So that's probably the most of a correlation, I'll say. It could just be odd timing, but it is odd timing.
And that was it. We didn't talk about it anymore. Too much tragedy, you know, no one wanted to hear about that.
Never experienced the Mothman, but he did talk about like a zone of fear that he went through, like when he was up in the TNT area. The TNT area was a major portal for pagan worship. And in the 80s, when I was growing up, there would be, and still to this day, but it was major, it was more of a large hub for this in the 80s and 90s. People would go up there and they would have, you know, do whatever, seances or some kind of rituals. Because my aunt at the time, she was in high school, they had snuck out of the house with some friends, went up into the igloos and was checking them out, and said that there was one igloo with all kinds of, and I believe it's still there to this day, with writing and symbols written all over the walls, and there was a table with an outline, where they'd done a burnt sacrifice of an animal. They think it was a cat. And, you know, I've had other people report and tell me that they had seen people up there with hoods, around fires, doing whatever it is that they're doing. I've seen other people say that they've been up there and this line of people come out on the road and they're in these hoods just walking, you know, along the road.
Never really experienced any feelings of what people talked about in the TNT area and stuff. John Keel talked about a zone of fear. He called it a fear zone. Certain area up there in the TNT area, when you walk the hair on the back of your neck would just stand up, and you would kind of get that weird feeling.
We are never really going to get over our fear until we find out for sure what this thing is.
4 Point Pleasant car occupants see bird-like creatures. Mothman and UFOs remain unexplained. Mason County has flying mystery. Professor says Mothman could be large crane. Flying man seen here, man. Winged red-eyed thing chases point couples across countryside.
A professor from West Virginia University came, and he said all they're seeing is a big sandhill crane that's migrating to the south, and they just happened to see it. But a lot of those witnesses I talked to were kind of insulted by that. They said that's not what we saw. What we encountered was more of a creature with wings and red eyes and stuff. A lot of people ask me, what I think the Mothman was or is, and that's probably the toughest question that I come across, because it's an open book. I don't think anybody will ever really be able to prove or disprove as to what it was or was not.
There's 3 different types of fallen angels in Greek mythology. One was the Nephilim. Some people pronounce it Nephilim. I say Nephilim. And it actually talks about that in the Bible, in Genesis and also in Ezekiel. And it talks about that they were a crossbreed between a fallen angel or demonic presence and a human woman. And the offspring was this Nephilim. And they would be very tall, about 7-8 feet tall. Looked like a man with wings, basically, is what it was. The second fallen angel in Greek mythology was a round object with eyes that went all the way around it, which sounds just like a UFO. And in Ezekiel, it actually talks about a similar being that was a round object with eyes that went all the way around it and legs lowered from the center of the body, and the body revolved around the legs. And it sounds just like a UFO. The thing that freaks me out the most is a demonic presence of a man that would often smell of sulfur. And there was a lot of people that talked about who experienced the men in black, how they stunk and smelled of sulfur. So take the Greek mythology, the activity going up in the TNT area, and Linda's personal experience that I heard her speak about when I was there. Put all 3 of those things together, and that is why I believe Mothman, the Men in Black, and UFOs was probably a spiritual manifestation of some sort. In the Bible, in Revelation, it talks about in the end of days, the Nephilim will return like it did in the days of Noah. And so it just kind of makes you wonder, is this a part of that? Because we don't know the answers to everything. We think as human beings that we do. We think we know everything, but we don't. And there's a lot more out there that, maybe one day we'll find the answers, but until then, you can just fall in love with the mystery.